In today's video, we will introduce the concept of triangulation. Triangulation refers to the process of conducting a sequence of moves designed to pass the move to the opponent. It might be that in a given position, we cannot make any immediate progress if it is our move, but if our opponent was to have the move in the same position, they would be in Zugzwang. It is called triangulation due to the shape of the maneuver that's usually used to accomplish this move transfer. Let's see this in action. So in this position, white has an extra pawn, but the immediate attempt to break through and create a passed pawn by playing c6 check doesn't quite work if black defends precisely. So for example, c6. Now it's important that black doesn't take here, because after the move king c5, king d8, we don't take the pawn, but we play king d6, gaining the opposition, and now king c8, king takes c6, king b8, and we can squeeze the black king out of the defense of the queening square by playing move b7, king a7, and king c7, assuring the pawn's promotion. So if king c6, however, we can't achieve this because king c8, b7, king b8, and we're forced to defend the pawn by playing king b6, and this is stalemate. So how does black defend here after the move c6? Well, it's actually by playing king c8. And now if we try king d6, then black plays the move king b8. And even though this looks tremendous because we can play the move c7 and create a protected passed pawn, after the move king c8, it's not possible for white to make any more progress because, well, we can't get around this. We can't ever attack this pawn because our own pawn is in the way, and we can't force black out of this defense of the queening square, because if we try, for example, king e6 or king e7, let's go king e6, well, again it's stalemate because we've taken away the d7 square. And if we go back, for example, then that will simply come out here and wait on these two squares. There's no way to force a win here. And if we'd instead tried king d7, well, then black can take the pawn by playing bc6, and if king c6, we don't gain the opposition, b7, and again we've got the same situation as before. So in the original position, c6 doesn't work. How can we win? Well, we can actually get the same position, but with it instead being black to move. And one of the ways we can accomplish this is to play the move king e5 here. If king c6 and king d4, king d7, and now king d5. And as you can see illustrated on the screen, we've done a little triangle on the board, and now it's black's move, and black is forced to concede the ground here, and eventually will conduct an invasion. Note that the mobility of the black king here is severely limited because of this threat. Like, it can't follow us up the board because c6 would come and simply promote the pawn. So black has to sort of stay in this area. So let's say king c8, king e6, king d8, king d6, the opposition again, king c8, king e7, king b8, king d7, and king a8. And now, well, we're not going to go any closer because that would allow stalemate, but fortunately we don't have to. We have moved c6 at this point, and now if bc6, the fastest win is king c7. We can also take the pawn, but as you can see after king c7, if it weren't for the c pawn, this would be stalemate and a draw, but as it is, black is forced to play the move c5, and we play b7 with check, and king c7, queens with check, and queen b6 checkmate, ending the game. Now we turn to a classic position in the history of endgame theory, although its ultimate origin is a matter of some dispute. Dvoretsky lists this as being played between Farney and Alapin in the year of 1912. However, the real date, or even the potential veracity of this game, is unclear. I'll leave a link to an article by Edward Winter in the description in case you want to know more about this. We shall firstly consider the position with no kings on the board in order to give ourselves a chance to work on the identification of the corresponding squares in a position. We can see that the squares d6 and d8 correspond to each other. This is because if it was black to move in that situation with the kings there, they would have to allow the promotion of the c-pawn. For example, king c8, white would play c7 and king d7 and promote the pawn. Well, if it was white to move in that situation with the king's placed like that, they would have to move away. Likewise, the squares c7 and c5 also correspond, because if black was to move in that situation, they would have to allow the white king into b6, which would win the a-pawn. While white to move in that situation wouldn't be able to make any progress and have to go sideways, for example, with king d5. Now, here comes the slightly more complicated part. The squares d6 and c5 can both be reached from the d5 square, and the squares c7 and d8 can both be reached from the c8 square. This means that the squares c8 and d5 also correspond to each other. Another important consideration is that white has the squares c4 and d4 to wait on, and black has b8 and d8. However, black's waiting squares are not connected while white's are. Why does this matter? Let's say the black king was on d8 here and white's on c4. White cannot step forward to c5 or d5 because then black could respond with either king c7 or king c8, occupying the corresponding square we've identified. However, what white can do is simply wait with king d4. This will force black to play either king c7 or king c8, and then white can occupy the corresponding square either c5 or d5, depending on where black is, and eventually win. So in the game, the kings were actually on d5 and c8, like this. Note that, as in the previous example, the mobility of the black king is severely limited by the necessity to contain the passed c-pawn. We have identified that the two squares the kings are on at this moment also correspond to each other, and in the game it is white to move. Therefore, the winning plan is to make use of the squares c4 and d4 to pass the move to black. Let's see how this worked for Farney in the alleged game. So king c4 was played, and black played king d8, and now white played king d4, and it's exactly what we've just discussed. Black has to occupy either one of these two squares, and white will occupy the square that corresponds to that, the square that black occupies, and win the game. So let's say king c8, we now play the move king d5, of course, and as you can see, we've conducted this little triangle maneuver, and this has achieved the goal of passing the move to the opponent, and now white is winning. Or rather, white was winning in the original position as well, but this is how we win the game. So, for example, king c7, king c5, and we've discussed this, king c8 would allow king b6, and the a-pawn will fall. And also, if king b8, then we can play king d6, and c7 on the next move, and promote our pawn. So the most resilient defense, I guess, is king d8, but we now again have king d6, king c8, and c7, and we promote the pawn. Now I'm just going to show one little trick in this position. After the move king b7, king d7, securing the promotion square, king a7, don't promote the pawn immediately, because that would again be stalemate. We've always got to be on our toes for these types of things, because they can come up in real games. However, the winning, there are obviously a few moves here. You could even promote to a rook if you wanted to, but the most efficient is, of course, king c6, which ensures that the pawn will promote with check on the next move, let's say. Obviously king a8 here is forced, c8 queen with check, and king a7 and queen b7, checkmate. So thank you for joining me for this discussion of triangulation. In the last video I said that this would be the final topic on corresponding squares, but we actually have one more to go over before then, which is about the more general cases of correspondence, such as the anti-opposition. Please join me next time for that. Goodbye for now.